We're back for another show. Sam's in the room. I'm in the room. Things and stuff and junk and whatnot. There's plenty to go around this week. Declarations on the candidates came out. A bunch of them are late, which apparently is not that big a deal. It's not that it's not so much a deadline as it is a strong suggestion on when you should turn in your paperwork. We'll talk about that a little bit. Some weird little planning commission items that I've found interesting this week, as well as League of Women Voters. So we'll talk about that kind of stuff and some whatever else that's going on. Some cocaine in the White House. You know, all the good times. We're here to have a party. So we don't have cocaine in this White House. Anyway, almostagreement at gmail.com. Find us on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube. Go to the website, almostagreement.com. While you're there, check out our Voter Guide 23 that I haven't done yet, but I will eventually. Being lazy. Almost in agreement on your favorite podcast writer. Like, share, friend, follow, tell your friends about us, all that kind of stuff. Thanks for checking us out, and we're going to start a show here in about 10 seconds. Hi, friend.
Hey.
How are things with you?
Hey, going.
What's new?
Nothing.
Liar. We don't have to talk about it. I was just...
That's cool.
You're changing jobs. It's cool. I'm happy for you. I'm excited. So, yeah, the deadline to turn in their quarter two stuff was, I think, Monday for this last week.
So it's not really applications. It's just like financial disclosures.
Yeah, so it's
still a deadline.
Right, you have a quarter. Every quarter you have a thing, and like every quarter, so every 3 months of the year, you have to file how much you took in and how much you spent in that 3-month period. And it's due like the second Monday of the following month. So second quarter is April, May, June. And so, like I said, I think it was like the 11th or something of July was the due date. And a number of candidates didn't make the due date. There's one that is currently still not filed as of this morning, at least. I haven't double-checked it since. One of the mayoral candidates.
I wonder if they have to like file for any kind of extension. They're like, hey, I haven't forgot about it. I'm
well,
working on it.
Like I was talking to Scott about it when doing their show, and it's like it's like, so do they get kicked out of the race at some point? Is there like how does this work? Like his joke was like, it's not like the election commissioner's financial division comes knocking on your door.
Right.
And it's like, well, but what happens? Like if you just don't file ever. You don't do the paperwork properly, and you have discrepancies and don't correct them, or
I would assume that definitely before there is an actual election, that if you still haven't filed that, they may take you off the ballot.
That's good. That's a question that I don't know the answer to because I'd be curious. Because early voting starts in like 3 weeks, 2 weeks.
Starting to see all the signs pop up.
Yep. Well, and like that's Scott and I were chatting about it today on their show. Is that city residents, be ready. Your mailboxes are going to start filling up real fast. Because there's a couple of them, like Tim Hill. He's running for the at-large A, I believe it is. Let me just pull. Since I'm in the Election Commission website, why don't I just pull up the candidate list so I don't misdo it. Yeah, Tim Hill, at-large C.
Yeah.
That's Hatcher and Hill Properties. That's Tim Hill.
Ah.
He's on the Planning Commission. He is also on the Sports Authority. Which he will have to vacate those positions. I think he has to vacate one of them. I don't know if he is obligated to vacate the Sports Authority or not, but we'll see that if he wins that seat against Tim Hill and Amelia Parker, who's the incumbent. But he's raised like $150,000 this year.
Is that a lot?
Well, I mean, American Cannon's like 5 over that. Like she's got like 155 she's raised this year.
No.
For a mayoral seat, which is a full-time position.
All right.
So like in the entirety of this race, you have city mayor, at-large ABC, District 5, and the judge. The mayor is the only one that's a full-time job. That's a 6-figure paycheck, full-time. Like, you're not allowed to have another job and do that job. Everybody else has other jobs. Or can have other jobs. Doesn't have to have another job if you're retired or whatever, which actually currently there are no retirees. Everybody that is on city council right now has a job and does city council. So, anyway, yeah, it's interesting. And this judge race thing, because it's what they're not. It's not a policy office. So what are we electing? Like I'm excited that it's for the first time in 20 years there's a challenge to Mr. Rawson, but like I don't know, like if I get to interview any of these people, like what, like I can't ask them, like, well, what are you going to do differently than Rawson does if it's not Rawson I'm talking to, obviously. Like, what are you going to do differently? Why should I vote you instead of this guy in?
Right.
What has he done that you don't like that you would do differently? They can't really answer those questions because, well, I just have to take it case by case basis. It's like it's the worst job interview ever. Like, what do you ask them? Like, you have to be a lawyer. You have to have a Tennessee license to.
I ask them how they got into
lawyery.
Ask them what their favorite constitutional amendment is.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I could. I mean, I agree that
or if there's a specific case that stuck out to them, you can find things to ask people.
Yeah, but like of value to the people who would be listening to make a decision on whether they want to elect.
That's going to be mainly just personal questions. Like I said, you can't ask them about policy because they can't say how they would or wouldn't vote on an upcoming case.
Right. I just think it's problem. It's I don't disagree. I don't know. I don't know if like I recall posturing at least like maybe voting for judges is dumb. Even though I also jokingly say we should vote for dog catcher and stuff too.
Yeah.
Like I like voting for people. I think the more people we vote for, the better. But I think the important thing is voting intelligently, not by who you vote for, but knowing what the job is, what you're asking them to do, and being able to engage either directly with a candidate or through the media on what makes you different than them. But by rule, you can't really do that with judges. And I think that's awkward. But yeah, Kincannon, I can pull it up, but actually it's such a pain in the ass. Like, I understand why they do it this way, but it's a pain in the ass. Where's she at? Mr. Tim Hill. His 7/11/23 disclosure. Beautiful handwriting by whomever his treasurer is. Balance on hand last report is $151,958. Total new receipts $32,000. Total expenditures $54,000. New total $129,000 in his doodad. And so, all right. So to put it as a question instead of just stupid posturing, whatever. What do you think? Somebody put it up in one of the Facebook feeds. Is like they feel like the number of donors is more important than the amount of donations. What are your thoughts on that?
I could see that being a good sign of, or a more positive sign of how many people may potentially come out and vote for you. I mean, money can win the election, but I would think as a candidate that would then show me I've at least got more individual people supporting me, not just 3 or 4 well-to-do people. Yeah.
I mean, I get what you're saying. So I pulled it up while you were saying that Kincannon started the period with $137,000, collected $48,500, spent $33,000, and currently has $152,000. So, like, as an at-large, Tim Hill is right up there, but nobody else is in the 6 figures, period.
Right.
And so Tim Hill's moving some cash. And I don't know, just it kind of drives me crazy, the amount of money in a city election where you're going to get 20,000 votes. So you're looking at $100 plus spent by one candidate per voter.
Where does it all go, man?
That's part of the question I have for sure. I mean, it's strange to me. Like, I mean, you talk about get it into national politics. Like, you can't even sniff at running for, a federal seat, like a state, like a Tennessee Senate seat, without having millions of dollars behind you. It's not an option. And it's fascinating to me. Like, I get it. There are hired people. There are consultants that are legitimate consultants, not just people you're paying to because you like them. Right. Like, that are legitimate consultants, and they provide a service or skill to your campaign. They go out and do polling for you. They go out and knock on doors for you, all those kind of things. I understand that things doesn't exist, but and again, I suppose since we have the most ridiculously long election cycles, that it makes sense that, you got somebody that's under your employ for 2 years, maybe, and if it's a full-time top-level advisor to a campaign, it's probably a 6-figure paycheck, I would think. Probably $150,000, $250,000 a year, I think would be fair. So, I mean, that's $500,000 for one employee in your campaign cycle. But it's, I don't know, like why it doesn't make sense to me. Like it shouldn't. Like I understand, like doing national ads aren't cheap, and getting enough of them out there because like the advertising game, especially on television, you got to do like a certain number of ads a day to get 20 eyeballs to actually confirm that you had 20 people actually see it. I think they say with TV ads, you have to see the commercial like 3 times before the average person actually picks up anything from it.
Huh.
Unless it's something very specifically in their wheelhouse. Like if it's just you're watching TV and a commercial comes on for something, unless there's something supremely catchy and well done about the commercial, or it's something you're specifically interested in, you have to see it more than once for you to actually register that thing exists.
So that's why some of them got more outrageous.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
I think last year there was like some kind of Kentucky like congressman, or it might have just been like a state race where it was like him with like a SWAT team like kicking in like the door to like some house.
$1 million production, right? $1 million production for a commercial.
So it's like that would stand out in your mind. You're like, oh shit, like is 24 still on? Like, no, this is a commercial. Oh shit.
I want to watch that.
This guy's running for office? Hell yeah, I'll vote for him.
That Beavis and Butthead, when Beavis and Butthead did Sabotage. Remember that one?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Like the whole shtick is they're watching the video for the song,
right? And
they think it's a commercial for a TV show that's coming out, or a movie. Like, I want to see that movie really bad. Like that's the whole shtick. It's
a good theme song.
Yeah, it's a really groovy intro tune. I can't wait to see this movie.
It's like an old cop show.
Yeah, it's pretty. Yeah, it's Beavis and Butthead, classic. It's good stuff. Yeah. But yeah, again, but to go back to the moral of the story, it's like I don't like it. Shouldn't be this way, and I don't think it. I think it's a stupid thing to say should or shouldn't be, and how things are, kind of whatever, especially in politics. But it shouldn't be this way. It shouldn't be 2023, summer of 2023, and we've already been in the 24 election cycle for president for 6 months, 9 months. I mean, Trump announced shortly after the midterms this past November. So come November, Trump has already been on the campaign, like officially campaigning for a year. And that's a year before the actual election that he's seeking. And realistically, I mean, he's been campaigning since the day he actually left the office,
right,
in January, like the day he was supposed to leave, even though he didn't lose, whatever. But he did leave. And so, like I think it's because I think it's a problem in politics further in the sense that, like they joke about, and I don't think it's so much a joke as a statement of fact, and that like you got, U.S. House reps that get off the House floor and spend the rest of the day making phone calls to donors.
Dialing for dollars, they call it.
And it's like it's kind of silly to say, but it's apparently it's a pretty real thing that happens pretty regularly. That, I mean, it's like, okay, it's a full-time job.
Once we're getting closer to the election cycle, good 9 months out.
Right, but it's a full-time job that the full-time job is collecting donations for your next run. It's not a full-time job in doing what your job is. It's a full-time job in keeping your job. And instead of keeping your job,
hire consultants.
But this is what I'm saying though. Is like instead of keeping your job by doing a good job like normal people do, like out in the real world, you keep the job by getting enough donations to just outspend your opponents in the next election cycle. So I think that sucks. I think it's something, I don't know what the fix is, but I think it's something that needs to have some conversation. I think ranked choice would be a start. I keep going back to that one.
To shorten the election cycle. I think I brought it here before, and I'd have to look it up again, but it's like Mexico, I think at least like for their presidential elections, they get like 6 months tops of like when they announce. Because once you announce it, I think it's the same in the U.S. system, that once you announce, that pretty much like starts a clock, that you only have like a certain period of time that you can collect donations. That prevents people for collecting donations for 4 and 5 years and just amassing a war chest.
But but in the U.S. system, at least, even if we put something like that in place with the U.S. system, it's direct versus indirect. You can have candidates out there dialing for dollars for PACs that will support them when they're allowed to start taking donations, which in and of itself is a problem. But I don't know. I don't know what the solution would be, but
I guess their actual like campaign fund that I guess they start once they announce, like that can't start collecting money or within you can only collect for a certain period of time.
Right. You can announce, but you can't collect. It doesn't really matter. Or it's the other way.
Like once you announce, I think the clock starts.
So theoretically, if it's 6 months and you announce a year ahead of time, the last 6 months of the campaign, you can't collect anymore.
I think it's something like that. I think there is some kind of time frame restriction on when you can when you can collect versus when you actually declare.
I mean, it's interesting.
Yeah, I want to say like Mexico. Yeah, they only have like 6 months. It might even be like 6 weeks. Like it's a much shorter campaign because they
I could go for 6 weeks.
juxtapose it to us.
2 years.
U.S. system of being a year and a half, 2 years.
I mean, I think right. I think the reality is that if you're a politician, especially on the federal level, you are always campaigning.
And that's why people don't vote. People just think there's just always votes going on, just because they're like, oh, I see signs out again. Like, must be campaigning again. Like, wow, would I do this shit like every couple days?
Didn't I just vote?
Yeah.
I mean, especially Knox County and state elections, the way they pile up with the county primary being in like May or June, and then the county general in August with the state and federal primaries, and then the state and federal election in November. Like if you're a Knox County resident and you only vote in November elections, you have not voted for a mayor, you have not voted for a county commissioner, ever. There's only a few races that are countywide. Actually, I don't know. Actually, no. There's no county seats that are elected in November. They're all elected in August with the primary for the state and federal seats. So, like in Elaine Davis, primaries in August, generals in November. But she's a state rep. She's not a county rep.
Right.
And so, yeah, if you only vote in November, you haven't voted for a Knox County official. You could be the biggest Glenn Jacobs fan in the world, but you've never voted for him if you only vote in November.
I guess I never thought about that.
It's weird. It's weird to me just because, but if the county does a charter amendment, it has to be on the November election. It's really weird. Like it doesn't make a lot of sense. It makes more sense than the city's weird shit with their at-large. I still think the at-large system is stupid. Not the at-large system, but the districts being voted for at large, I think is extra dumb.
Assuming they know more people show up for the general, which is why there's that rule that any kind of change to the charter would need to be on a general election.
Yeah. But I mean, I think if you understand that rule, then any change to the mayor's office should be on the election that most people go to. I mean, if that's the thought process, I agree. But, okay, fine, the county commission or whatever, because they don't have as much authority in this, that, and the other, that's fine. But at least the mayor's office, the sheriff, these people that are the big names that we see on the news all the time.
Right, but they don't have as much as far as like legislation goes. To where if you're trying to put out a poll essentially to the general public of changing a law of the state or changing a rule within the city or county.
Yeah, but I mean, the rule has to be put into motion by the city or county government that you...
Right, but the mayor and sheriff have nothing to do with making those rules.
Sure they do. They absolutely do.
They can help mold it, but... I
mean, the committee, like...
I guess they could propose it, but as far as...
For the city's sake, for the city's sake, the city council is kind of worthless. The way the city's set up governmentally, it's really all the mayor's office, and the city council is just kind of rubber stamp check and stuff. And looking over the budget, but even in that, if the mayor wants her budget, she gets her budget, whether the city council likes it or not. The city council, to me, is just kind of a larger group of people for the public to yell at, because you're not going to get an audience with the mayor often enough. But like, they talk like the Compass guys talk about all the time. It's 9 times out of 10, anything before city council, as far as a city policy, it comes from the mayor's office, who is proposing a change or an addition to or whatever, and they're voting on whether or not to approve an addition. Like that's what like Amelia Parker's kind of claim to fame is like she's finishing up her first term there, and she's put a bunch of stuff before the city, but she's passed a handful of items, which a lot of councilors don't ever actually present anything, let alone get it passed in their tenure as a city councilor. And so Amelia Parker, despite her general antithesis to everything else that's going on in the city and as far as governmentally, she's gotten things on the floor and passed from her creation, not coming from the mayor's office and then her approving it. And so there's an avenue. There is an avenue there. But so anyway, yeah, I don't you sent me this one, this Doug Burgum. Where's he from?
North Dakota.
North Dakota. He's running for president, apparently. And in order to get on any real conversational ballots and stuff like that, you have to have a certain people in your petition or whatever. And so basically he's paying people $20 to donate $1 to his campaign so that he can have enough people donating to his campaign to break a threshold, which apparently is legal. Sounds illegal.
I mean, I would assume he went to his lawyers to make sure that he could do this thing.
I mean, yeah. I mean, there's 50,000.
And it's definitely in the gray area. But I guess technically, there isn't some kind of rule against it.
Is it legal? Straw donor, yeah. It's legal to reimburse another person for their campaign contribution. Giving a donor a $20 gift card seems a little bit like that. Burgum isn't technically buying votes. He is simply buying the right to compete. The threshold for competing on the debate stage on August 23rd is set by the Republican National Committee, which hopes to winnow a field. I don't know if I know that word, winnow. A wide field, like whittle the field down to a manageable group. Burgum is competing within the Republican primary and is just trying to game the debate qualification rules. The scheme does test the limits of current law. So it seems to be unclear on the legality. If the polls are to be believed, he's probably hovering just under 1%. And that's important because a 1% polling mark is another threshold required to be invited to the August debate. So I don't know. It doesn't say what the gift cards are for. Are they just like...
Yeah, I assume it's just like a generic...
Just like a Visa $20 gift card. So it's basically... I mean, I'd do it. If I was in North Dakota, I'd send him $1.
So winnow is a word.
I mean, I assumed that NPR put it on there.
To remove... Well, I was going to say, I've seen some random typos since... A lot more like the news articles that I've read. Sometimes it's just like double words, like it's like a that, and just kind of like just weird grammatical stuff. Some of it I don't know if they've just kind of copied and pasted it when they're trying to like edit something down to size or whatever. They end up kind of like double typing something. I definitely see like some odd words. I'm like, I catch that. Like, what are the editors doing these days?
AI's testing. It's AI doing the editing.
Yeah, possibly.
Because that's a thing.
Oh, yeah.
Or what else?
Some commercial for something called like Grammarly.
Yeah, that's been around for a little bit.
Yeah, I've heard of it for a while, but apparently it'll give you like suggestions. You can have it like highlight a paragraph when you're like typing an email to a coworker. You can be like, make it more personal, or make this more direct, or
I mean, like Word and stuff has some of that.
Make this sound more like persuasive.
Right, Word has some of that where like it'll do autofill to try to complete a word or a sentence for you. But like the grammar check now, instead of just being like this should be a colon, not a comma or something like that. Instead of it just being that, it's like, is this the right word? Like, is this the word you want to use? Like, I spelled it right. Like, it's not a spelling issue. It's just this isn't like it. I can't remember. Like, a lot of stuff that's like I get it. It's actually kind of handy. It's stuff that like we use in language speaking, but we don't. It's not the correct way to write it.
All right.
And so it'll highlight that and suggest a correction. And it's just like, no, I'm good with having my email sound like what I speak like.
All right. Not trying to be formal.
I don't want to freak my mom out and think that she's got some spam email because it doesn't sound like me.
Right. To whom it may concern.
Right. I mean, I've done a few letters like that where I've actually written that. But, yeah.
I'm surprised I never got like accused of like plagiarizing or whatever, because I used to like mixing up British and American English of just like different words that are spelled differently, like color. Yeah. And I would switch it up throughout the thing, and I'm surprised I never got asked, like, are you forgetting that you're copying words from like other places? You're going to like the Oxford English Dictionary?
I think it's yeah, that's so you. That is so you. I love it.
I just thought it was funny because it's not incorrect.
No,
it's
just obviously something's weird going on here, and if you're paying attention, you're going to go, I think this might be a flag of some sort I might need to pay attention to.
What's he talking about? Aubergines. We don't have aubergines here. It's an eggplant, I think.
He said something about a bonnet in a car. I'm so confused.
He put his stuff in the boot. What?
Okay, so in a great example of the way everybody on the planet deals with government on a regular basis, city county planning commission had a meeting this week, and they ended up with what they call punting. So the next meeting, they'll actually make a decision on it. But there's a developer on Chickamauga. It's bought a couple properties on Chickamauga, if you know where that is. It's between Central and Broadway, right up there, just on the south side of Sharps Ridge.
I think I've driven around.
It's a little gap. It's not a super nice. It's not a bad part of town, but it's not a super nice part of town either. Whatever. Anywho, it's the very north end of Norwood. I can't remember what the two neighborhoods are called that are that little wedge between Central and Broadway and 640 before you get to Fountain City.
Okay.
Anyway, there's it's like 2 or 3 neighborhoods in there, and they have a pretty decent homeowners, so like not an HOA, but neighborhood groups and stuff like that. Anyway, this developer wanted to put this thing in, and the whole neighborhood's like, no. He wanted to take it and put like a set of townhouses or like 6 duplexes all piled into one property or whatever. Which it's like that is this missing middle housing that everybody keeps talking about.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is, and there's a couple people on the Facebook feeds in the Colloquy and other places that I've seen them before talking about how we need to do something about the housing situation in this town. Housing's too expensive. This is ridiculous. And then, a solution comes into their neighborhood, and they're like, nope, it's not good for the neighborhood. It doesn't match the scheme. It's not appropriate for this part of town. It's like, well, of course not. It's the same thing we talk about with Mayor Jacobs got some money together. I don't know. I haven't heard, actually. I probably should follow up with Scott or Jesse, see what they know about it. But Mayor Jacobs and American Canyon, for that matter, with the state have kind of congealed some funding available to build a new mental hospital. Where are we going to put it? Everybody agrees we need it. Nobody wants it.
Not in my backyard.
And it's like, okay, people, I get it. We talked about this last week. I with Henson Salem, I think I'm an advocate for moving single family housing from the planning, from the zoning. It's not saying you can't have a single family house or a single family neighborhood. It's just saying that you can't only be a single home. No property can only be a single family home by rule.
Single family property? As far as
right, one parcel
family home.
Right, one parcel can so there is a zone called single family housing where one parcel is only allowed to have one home. And so then there's large, any of your large neighborhoods, your neighborhood, my neighborhood, my parents' neighborhood, and stuff like that. That's a single family residential zone. Any parcel in that zone can only have one house as a residence on it.
Right. Or you could do that mother-in-law shed or whatever.
Right. You can. I think even in single family in Knox County, you can do the upstairs thing like we were talking about above a separated garage. But it has to be a separated garage. It has to be a second story, which again is ridiculous for my mother-in-law who is elderly. I'm not putting her up a flight of stairs. It's stupid. But that's how the zoning currently sits on it. I don't think. I think with the way Knoxville has grown, just need to retire that zone. And to turn and so all zone the small the least dense zoning available needs to become whatever the next denser one is after single family, which would be maximum of 2 parcels or something of that nature. I don't know. So again, but it goes to the point. It's everybody who's paying attention and sees the growth in Knoxville and is involved in the politics, blah, 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 agrees this is an inevitability. We have to go down this path. We have to get more dense housing in place. It doesn't have to be super dense, 15-story apartment complexes and stuff like that, like some, like a New York City style apartment building. But we need to get duplexes. We need to get quadplexes. We need to get more stuff available. 1, just to have more available housing, period, but 2, to make it in a better price point where people can actually afford to buy houses or rent the house or rent the quarter of a quadplex or whatever it is. We're not going to get affordable housing, anything close to what would be considered affordable housing, if we're only allowed to build single-family homes, or we're only allowed to build more dense stuff in very small, specific areas.
Yeah.
We have to spread it out. And so this is a perfect example of that. And so Planning Commission basically said we're going to move it to next month's meeting in the hopes that the developer and the neighborhood associations can kind of come to an agreement on their own.
How big of a unit were they talking about? Do you remember?
We said townhouses, so I think it's not unsimilar to the thing behind me here, where it's like,
some of the older neighborhoods around there, I think some of them don't have. I want to say not too far from there. There was talk of someone that was wanting to put I think it might have been like a cookout or something in there. But then it would require, I guess, the kind of entrances and exits to kind of go down a couple side streets to where all those homes there have no driveways, so it's all on-street parking.
On-street parking.
So apparently, traffic's already bad. So that whole neighborhood was like, "No, we really don't want this."
I mean, that is an issue.
That's where I wonder if it's kind of similar to that, because that area, a lot of those houses are kind of tight together.
That's a fair point.
They're talking about putting in, 20 more units essentially.
I mean, I don't know what the zoning is on because I mean, like this townhouse development behind me. I mean, the actual street is super narrow, and as a rule of the complex, you cannot park on street.
Right.
You have to park in driveways, and the driveways are barely 2 cars wide.
Right.
And then there's like 5 random guest parking spaces spread out through the complex.
Good luck.
We took the camper through there. That was interesting.
Yeah.
But I don't know. But again, I would assume that even if you're doing multifamily dwellings, that even in zone for it, you have to have availability for at least for your tenants to park. You can't. I guess you could. It depends. I'm curious. I don't know what the rules are on that. I'm sure in some developing guidelines there is parking requirements. Because I was saying that, and then I'm thinking, well, anybody on Gay Street doesn't get a parking space with their apartment or condo or whatever they call those things.
No, a lot of those nice ones do. Like they have their own lots.
Right, but that's a feature. That's not an. I don't know if that's
not a requirement.
Right, yeah. I don't know if it's a feature or a requirement. I guess is what I'm saying. It's like, well, as a benefit of renting from us or buying this $400,000 townhouse or whatever it is, we will get you a parking space with it. I don't know what the rules are on that.
Yeah,
that's the question. And then the other development one that was going on is apparently there's some farm, apparently I can't remember what it is, but they've been doing weddings there for like 2 years, but they didn't get their special permit because as an agricultural property, you can't do anything to make money on your own property as a farmer that isn't farm related without a special license. And so they got their business permit to be an event venue or rural something. I can't remember what the official title is of it when it's out in agricultural areas or whatever. Right. It's just some weird rules. Like you can't have anything within 200 feet of the property line where any activity goes on that isn't farming.
Well, agricultural property is taxed a hell of a lot lower than a commercial property if you're off all that property is saying you're doing business on it.
I mean, I could acknowledge that, but that's not where the zoning comes in to correct it. It's not what it seems, because what it seems like is that as a farm, you can get rezoned because this goes to anything. So like people that do like corn mazes for like Halloween or whatever, that is a non-farming activity and you have to have a special
I'm sure that,
use
but
license.
that permit gives you probably just for that, 3 or 4 weeks that you do the corn maze.
The way Scott kind of described it is that you get a special use you get a special use zoning basically, which says even though this agriculture, you can do this non-agricultural activity on it.
Gotcha.
And it's not in a window of time. It's an amendment to the current zoning that it sits in. And so as a corn maze could do a corn maze year round if you could keep the corn up.
Right.
It's a seasonal thing because of.
I think there's got to be some kind of limitations to it. I don't know what it is, but
I mean,
probably a certain percentage of your property.
Yeah, I mean the way it's the way Scott described it, at least when he was talking about it today on their show, is, it's full on like nothing within 200 feet of other property, and so this place has a couple of glamping sites, way in the back 40, but it's close enough to their neighbor that their neighbor has to give them permission to do it. That is literally the language in the zoning, is that you can do that if your neighbor signs a waiver saying that they're okay with it. And I'm trying to think of what the harm I mean, they don't have to claim harm. The neighbor doesn't. They just don't want it. They don't want it. But I'm trying to think of what the theoretical harm would be in that conversation. Well, there's newlywed couples out there doing it and disturbing my cows. Like, what is the
rocking the trailer?
That's what I'm saying. Like, what's the potential harm to the neighboring property? Like, if it's a noise issue, okay, that makes sense. You know, if the residents of the neighboring farm happens to be close to that as well, I could see that restriction being logical. But like, if you got like two 100-acre farms that are back to back, and the actual farmhouses are up in the front of each of the properties, and you're, you know, I don't know if a 100-acre farm's squared, how far across is that? I don't know how to do the math on acreage, but I'd say a half a mile,
or something like that,
from the front to the back of a square acre. So let's say 3/4 miles for the same conversation. So if our house is in the front and the neighbor behind me, their house is in the front, we're 1.5 miles apart. So even if I have something right on the property line, it's 3/4 mile from the residence. So if I have something that goes on back there that makes noise, it's not unless it's super loud, that's not fair to call a disturbance. Like, what would be the damages that the neighbor can claim by having something going on that isn't farming? Because hell, my combine or something like that's going to be louder than a couple fucking. If I have like wheat or something, get
right.
it? Yeah. And that's if the house happened to be close enough within earshot. Like, I don't understand that part of it. Like, why? I don't understand the reasoning for that zoning requirement in the first place, regardless of the special exception.
I'm trying to think of something that would just like smell really bad, like if you were doing, taxidermy or something weird.
Yeah, I mean, if you had a tanning business,
tanning, yeah,
right. If you're tanning hides as an aside, I don't know if that would count. That might fall under agriculture anyway. Would that be an industrial process?
That would still be a business. I don't know about agriculture. Yeah, that would be considered agricultural.
I mean, if you have a cattle ranch and you're tanning your cattle's hides as part of, you butcher, sell the meat, and then tan the hides, I don't know. I'm not saying it is or isn't. I don't know the answer to that. I'm just saying I could see it as an adjacent.
I would think if you're just tanning, I don't think it'd be considered agricultural.
I agree with just tanning, but I'm just saying, but a corn maze isn't
you had livestock.
Just mazing. They're doing the farm and then they're doing the maze periodically. That's what I'm saying, though. Like, I don't understand.
Right, but then I think they're also losing a lot of. They're losing that whole plot of land that they have the maze on.
Right, but they're giving it up because they're making more from the maze, obviously.
Probably. Yeah.
Maze. There's some spelling jokes there.
Right.
But I'm saying, like, I get the premise insofar as if there was a damage being done, that I could see where you'd write something like that into place. But I can't imagine many circumstances that would make logical sense that me having, I could have a shed up there that I play rock music in. Like, noise is the only thing that makes any sense to me.
Yeah.
Like, that's the only thing that's coming to mind is that a noise issue because it's disturbing the neighbor and or its livestock, because I put a range up there and I'm letting people pay me to use my gun range that's on my back 40 that's scaring the shit out of the cattle in the neighboring field. That makes sense to me. As a non-farming function that I'm using on my farm, that my neighbor should have the right to tell me I can't do. Baseline, I don't agree with that in principle at all, but trying to be reasonable about it, that makes sense to me. But if there's no damages, I don't see how you'd write something in place that could theoretically give the neighbor power without being damaged. And that's what the current zoning seems to set it up as. And I think that's weird. Am I making sense at all now?
Yeah. I mean, I can't think of too many instances in which it would be an issue, but I again would assume that there are reasons that was written into it.
I mean, yeah.
I don't know if it is, just for smaller farms or where you have multiple farms, which isn't very common. Maybe more common around here, where you might have a couple small farms,
right,
kind of next to each other.
Right. Like I said, I could get I get the principle if the rule was from the residents of the neighboring farm, if there was a distance requirement for their own comfort because they don't want to have to hear or see something. It's not fair for them to have to see or hear something coming off of your farm because it's 100 feet from property line and your house is close to the property line of your farm. It's like I could see that. That makes sense. I don't necessarily agree with it, but it makes sense. Where this one just seems like, well, I pissed off my neighbor Joe, and he won't let me do anything on my farm other than farm because he has the power to tell me no. And so...
But I would think there's like a list of reasons that you can give for, denying.
They don't have to. They just have to. It's literally like the way
It's
this...
just a yes or no.
Yeah, the way it's written is that the farm owner who's doing the wedding venue has to go to his neighbor and with a waiver saying, will you permit us to do this activity within 200 feet of your property line?
Oh, I thought you were talking about like the glamping little cabins or trailers out in the back of this property.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Oh, you were talking about the wedding.
But it's
that's
part of
like
the wedding venue.
package.
Right,
Gotcha.
it's part of the wedding package, yeah.
I was thinking it was separate
Sorry.
business. He had a
even if
wedding
it was-
venue, but then he had...
But even if it was a separate venue, even if it was a farm that was just had some glamping sites out in the way back, they would have to go through this special zoning exception, and that the number one rule on it is that your neighbor's cool with it. Which again, if there is damages, I could get behind that rule, but if it's just I don't like my neighbor, so I'm not going to let him make any more money, like that's kind of shitty.
I know some of the glamping you could have runoff. I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah, but I mean, as a hotel motel or whatever, you're going to have to follow certain coding and stuff like that anyway. So you can't, as a rental space, it's not any different than a landlord or a hotel in town. You can't just dump your wastewater out the back. It's got to be properly. It's got to be processed.
Just have a small little like gray well, basically gray water well.
Well, I mean, you did whatever. I mean,
Which if your neighbor is on well water, that could then leach into his well.
I mean, it would have to be within the same rules of wastewater for the farm in general.
Right.
And maybe within 200
Those
feet of
EPA rules have been lessened.
Maybe, but still, it doesn't. Okay, yes, maybe if you have to put in a septic system for the glamping site, and the argument is that that's within 200 feet, and that may affect our water on our side. Okay, but that's not how the rule's written. It's just literally, are you okay with this or not? Right. They don't have to claim damages, but that is a good example of something that could theoretically be a logical complaint from the neighbor. Is they put that septic in, but that septic leaches into my yard or into my farm, which is where my pigs feed.
Yeah,
which is probably not a bad thing, but whatever.
Pigs are very clean animals.
Yeah, but they eat everything, don't they?
They eat a lot of stuff, yeah.
Like people, got some snatch action.
They can. Actually, I just watched a clip of that earlier.
Dags.
It was the top 10, like brick top, like scenes or whatever.
Yeah. But top 10 was even in the movie 10
Or
times?
no, it was like 10 minutes of brick top or something like that. He said it a decent bit.
There's some good lines.
Just keep kind of going back to him.
Yeah, it's a good movie. It's a classic. Brad Pitt, sexy son of a bitch. Gypsy.
Yeah, I forgot. Apparently he had two
Jason
fights.
Statham?
I thought he just did one fight as a pikey. But apparently he did two fights because show the scene. He was like, all right, need you to get the pikey again. And he's like, this time he better go down in the fourth round.
Fixing fights. Giant diamonds. I don't remember that whole movie. It's a crazy movie. But
Guy Ritchie does that where there's like 5 different stories that
all kind of running simultaneously and
they all kind of crash in the end together.
Yeah. They kind of intertwine, but they kind of don't. And then you finally get some major moment. And yeah, it's a good movie. It's
like,
fun.
oh shit.
Yeah. I didn't see that coming, even though it had to go somewhere, but I didn't see that combination of things coming out on the other side. So yeah, that was the zoning stuff. Steve Triplett's trying to cut school board time in half, and nobody's having it. That was an interesting.
As far as school board time.
So school board has a Monday work session and a Thursday voting session. So you go down to the new Knox County Schools boardroom, which is in the bottom of TVA Tower somewhere. I can't remember. And they have this boardroom where they do their public meetings, similar to the city county building. And so they do. They only do one. They're required by law to do one voting meeting a month, and they do that voting meetings on Thursday. It was this past Thursday, so it's the second Thursday of the month, I believe. And then they do a work session. Currently, they do a work session on the Monday before. So this past week, they had a work session Monday, voting meeting Thursday. Commission does something similar, except they do it a week apart. They do their work session on Monday and then their voting meeting the following Monday. City Council doesn't do a work session. They just have 2 voting meetings a month. And so the idea of these work sessions is it's an opportunity because for sunshine law reasons, Steve Triplett and Jennifer Owen, for example, can't sit down and have lunch and talk about stuff. Or even the whole board can't get together and have just a lunch meeting to talk about what's going on and what's coming up and have their debates. They have to do it publicly. And so at least to me, my assumption is that we do these work sessions as a chance for them to talk, because they can't talk without a significant amount of effort in publicizing their intent to hang out. So this one is already baked into the cake. We all know this one's happening. So this is a chance for Steve Triplett, for example, to be like, hey, I got this idea. This thing that we're doing right now is kind of a waste of time. Can we put this on the agenda to vote this thing away? Which is essentially what happened this week. It's like he used the work session to pitch the idea of getting rid of the work session. And then they go to the voting meeting, or they didn't like the work session. They were like, we're not even putting this on the voting meeting one because we're keeping this thing in place. And I kind of get it both ways. It's like, everybody on school board has a day job. They're part-time people. The totality of the job has a lot going on anyway. And so maybe as a way to make it a little easier on their personal and professional lives outside of being a board member, we could cut down on how much time we have to sit here, especially with the public forums that sometimes last for hours and hours and hours. It's a way for us to cut that down a little bit. Let's do it. I get the premise, but they can't really talk otherwise. So how are you supposed to have an agenda item come up? Like there's this outside of school religious teaching credit thing that's going on right now. Have you heard any of this story? Mm-mm. All right, we'll come back around to that, but that's one that they voted on this week as well. Well, how are they supposed to have a discussion as a board? I mean, they can do it where it's on the agenda, and then at the voting meeting, during the meeting, they have the conversation about it, and then they vote on it at the end. But it's like, well, I have some questions that the other board members don't have answers to. I'd like to talk to, Mr. Weiswick's in the room because it's a school board meeting, but I would like to talk to, I don't know, some of these churches who plan on providing this service and see what they're actually going to do before I'm going to say that that we're going to allow this activity to happen. And so anyway, that's what it boils down to. The school board was like, no, we need this meeting. It's the only time we get to talk about stuff. And so that didn't get voted on. Now the outside school religious studies credit thing is kind of weird. You want to guess at what this is by the definition that I just put together?
Outside schools religious credit?
Yeah, that's not the right title. I'm just kind of
right.
I'm paraphrasing from memory. But essentially what's happening is, as a Bearden High School student, I want to go to Central Baptist Bearden for one period a day and take Bible lessons from my pastor.
I don't have that BA credit.
And it's right. So the without take the school credit part out of the conversation. If a certain amount of criteria is in place, Knox County Schools doesn't have a choice but to let me. Like I can go do outside of school religious study with a thing during school hours in replacement of an elective. I can do that anyway. The vote this week,
so?
That's state law. You have to, like, if it's, again, there's some parameters and rules on who and what can provide said studies, but there is they have to allow that. The state law makes the school board has to allow that. But what the school board was voting on is whether or not you can get a extra or an elective credit for it, which they ended up, I think, passing. But, which is interesting, Reverend Butler, who's a school board member, and a reverend, obviously, like his take on it was like, yeah, but this opens the door for all these other things. Like I took it as, he didn't say it like really saucy, but I kind of took it as a, if we're going to allow this one, then that means we have to let Muslims do it, and Jews do it, and atheists and Satanists and whatever. But I mean, that was his pushback on it. He's like, right. I like it for what we are talking about doing, and for the people who are stepping up to provide the service, I kind of like it, but that also means we have to let these other ones in. That's how I took his statement. I could be misinterpreting what he was trying to say, But that was his objection, but then he ended up voting for it. His objection was this opens the door to any group that has a religious affiliation to being able to put forth a thing, and if the student wants to take it, he has to take it, or we have to let him take it.
It's true.
Well, I mean, and it's only religious studies too. It's not like you could have a. I mean, I think there's a different program that does some of it in like vocational skills, where you can go out and be an apprentice at a welding shop for an hour a day and learn some welding, like learn some vocational skills,
right.
And get and I don't know if they get a credit or not as an elective for that, but that is a thing that I think exists too. But this is a separate one that's religion only. But so it's a credit now. I think it passed. I think it's a 9-member body. It passed 7-1, and Catherine Bike was not in this week.
I think I'd be more acceptable of it of it being a school credit, if they then were allowed to, take it in conjunction with, Catholic high school or an actually like religious school.
Well, like the rules on it
already is a class.
The rules on it, as I understand it, is that the instructor has to be a certified state educator. That the school board is allowed to look over the curriculum, but cannot exclude it on religious basis. Which basically means the school board can look at it and be like, well, they're teaching them something. I can't object to what they're teaching them because it's going to be religion, because it's a religious thing. So we can't object to it on a religious basis. Which will be interesting when a Wicca group or something puts one together. Because then you get the argument of whether it's religion proper or not and blah, 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 all that kind of bullshit. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really I get the complaint. I actually get the complaint of Jennifer Owen, who was the one who voted against it, probably best. She put a long 5-paragraph thing on her Facebook page about it. It was basically saying, it's like this can and probably will devalue a Knox County school education, because potentially, unlikely, it'd be really hard for a kid to figure out how to do it, but potentially you can take one a semester.
That's what I was about to say. I'm assuming you can only do that one time.
And so it could be one a semester. And so it would be 8 of 22 credit hours. You have to have 22 credit hours to graduate.
Could we take that many electives?
I don't know. I took band every year.
Right.
I could have not took. I think
it's considered an elective.
Right. I could have not took.
Well,
band.
no, you had to have 2 years of some kind of music to graduate.
Right.
I think you had to
it's
take
like right
chorus or band or something.
Right.
else.
It's likely that when it all breaks down, you couldn't do one every semester as a student and get all the required stuff in place. You probably, but maybe six of your 22 credit hours. So a quarter. That's a lot.
Yeah.
A quarter of your education isn't a Knox County education technically once it comes down to it, but you got credit for it. So it does kind of cheapen the diploma.
Just don't really understand why, if a parent or a student would want that much religious instruction,
why it has to be during school hours.
Well, why they wouldn't just go to a religious school?
I have money
if they wanted that.
That'd be my first guess. I mean, because there's a significant. I would. That's another question that I don't know the answer to either. Is obviously Knox County Schools isn't going to pay for it. They're not going to pay for.
That was another question I had. Is the school being reimbursed for this? For essentially teaching?
I don't think so. That's a good question, though. I don't think so, because the responsibility of transportation would be on the student, or not on the student, but on the outside education facility. So again, if what's the closest church to Bearden?
That one right across Gallagher.
Oh yeah, well that's like Lutheran or something. That's got a population.
It's just Lutheran.
I've never seen anybody there ever. We only use that parking lot to go back in the cemetery and smoke.
So we were there on Sundays and Wednesdays. I can't remember seeing cars on Wednesday evenings. But
I'm trying to think. Yeah, but anyway, yeah. If that way, which would make it easy for the student because it'd be just a quick jaunt across the street and you could get a good amount of time in. Because that's one of the questions is it's got to be the break of time between Class A and Class C.
Right.
So if you're taking your Class B period, you have the time to get there, get settled, take the education, and get back to be on time for your third class or whatever of the day. And so all the
smart they would set up as maybe their last class or
all the logistics costs and stuff go on to this third party as I understand it. So as far as transportation, because one of the questions I had,
who is this third party?
the church or whomever.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
One of the questions I had is like, well, if you're a 16, 17, 18-year-old high schooler and you drive to school, can you take your car off campus to go to the thing, or do you have to? They have to send a bus? Like, they're like, because I think you cannot leave. You cannot come back. At least you can leave. I don't know. I don't remember. Were we allowed to leave?
Yeah, well, like I had something our senior year. I couldn't take it because I'd failed my limit of classes. But it was basically kind of like this elective thing to where you could go to. I think some people got jobs, but some people wouldn't.
It was like a work release.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't remember what they called it.
Actually,
A whole
sounds
several
like
other people that were
prison.
doing that, like basically like 7:00 or 7:30 in the morning. They were doing that and then going to school.
Right.
But it was like their out of school thing.
But like the
But
parking
some
lot
people were taking their first 3 periods in that block scheduling, and then their 4th period was that
release.
I think it's called out of school experience, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, but I remember like the rules on parking and stuff are real strict and stuff like that, and so I don't know if this is another layer to the whole debacle. I mean, the real conversation here is it's not taking dollars, as far as I understand it. So no money, no at least no school money is being spent on this. It's possible that some like state grants or something are going to these facilities are doing the education program, but I don't know how to, like, that's a different animal. So at least no Knox County school money is going into it. I don't know. I don't know that I necessarily agree that it should be a credit or not. I don't know. I mean, because it's an elective. Some people, their electives is their prime band. Like that's what, like, my totality was around band. It just had to be an elective after my 2 semesters that I was required. And so it's an elective, you're electing to do art, or, we did auto mechanics. I did electronics a couple times. It's experiential stuff that was kind of neat. It wasn't, electronics and auto mech for that matter weren't like a life path for me, but it was something that I'm glad I took. I could see this as, I don't see why this couldn't kind of fall into that same category. And go ahead and give the credit. You save, like, theoretically, the school board should be saving money in the process. We're not paying the teachers. We're not paying this other stuff. It should open room for other students to take more stuff.
Paying paying
the outside
the teachers of this.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
So, like I said, as far as I know, all the outside stuff, all the third party education is outside of Knox County schools budgetarily, including the transportation. It doesn't take school buses or anything like that. So
it's going to be the parishioners floating that bill.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I get it. I don't know. Because realistically, okay, I actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm going to push back on Jennifer Owen's idea on it. It's like, no, it doesn't. It doesn't cheapen the value of the diploma. Because every student in Knox County High School takes a series of electives. For most of them has really nothing other than some experiential knowledge of a different thing that they aren't necessarily super into. Some people, like me, got into band and loved it. That was my elective core. Everything, as long as I had band on there, anything else was just there. But there are plenty of kids who go through and they don't have a real passion. They don't know what their real passion is yet. They're going through that phase of life. And so they're taking art, they're taking band, they're taking auto mechanics. They're just kind of bouncing around through these things. What's the problem with having an outside one that happens to be a religious-based one?
I could see that if they limit it to just 1 or 2 times that you could do it. But if, like you said, if they can do it for 6 or 7 periods throughout their
But what's
4
the
years
what's
of
the
high school,
when it comes down to the brass tacks of it, what did band do for me educationally as far as Knox County Schools is concerned? It was a passion of mine. I enjoyed it. I started the band path and the music path in college, but I decided to opt out of that as I got going into it. So as an elective, it was just something fun that I got to do at school that I really enjoyed. I don't see it. You know what I'm saying?
kind of.
And I mean, I did band. I wasn't there first semester freshman year, but I did band for 7 semesters.
Right, but I mean, they've done many studies. I don't want to get scientific about it or anything, but the actual learning how to read music and playing music does kind of open up your mind to being able to learn other things more easily. Well, not necessarily more easily, but
I mean, yeah, they tend to say
challenge you to use a different part of your brain.
Understanding music usually makes you mathematically. It makes math easier for a lot of kids.
Math or something, yeah.
They usually say math is one of those that, I don't know, I guess the intervals and all that stuff, all the math that is the eighths and the quarters and all that kind of stuff helps translate some math skills in. But, I mean, I would say that, why wouldn't I mean, theology at large is a course of study in colleges. And now it's a more broad sense where they're trying to give you different theologies from different places and times and history and stuff like that. But, I mean, it could be an introduction to theology at large that you may go to a seminary instead of going to a regular college. May or may not be the best life choice for you. I don't know. I'm just saying, like, it tracks to me the more, like, as we're talking about it, as I'm thinking about it while we're talking about it, it kind of tracks to me that I don't see why it shouldn't count as an elective, whether it's a Wicca one or a Baptist one. It's just something.
Right, but I don't think they'll allow those.
They have to. I don't know. I don't know how Wicca sits. It's a good
Find a
question.
way around it. It's all the people who make those decisions. They're like, oh, that's not a recognized religion.
Yeah, that is a
Only religions that accepts Jesus as our Lord and Savior.
yeah.
Except for Judaism, they're okay with.
They're
those.
okay because they're half us.
I still don't get that. I was like, how do you lump Judeo-Christianity together?
I
It's
mean,
like they're literally opposing. Like one says you have to accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. The other one says
Islam. I mean,
we realize he was a person, but he's not.
I just
he's
find
not
like
chosen.
the fact that exists with an exclusion of Islam. They're all Abrahamic. It's all like that's the term I've always used for it. It's the Abrahamics,
right.
And so
They all recognize the Old Testament,
right. It's just where it's some stayed on the path, and we had a split go one way, a split go the other way, and that's Christianity and Islam. And the original stayed on the original path.
like, no, we're going to write another book, and then the Mormons are like, yeah, we're going to write a third book.
Right. And we're going to have another book on that, and then there's all these different...
Jewish was like, no, we're good with the Old Testament.
We had the book. We don't need another book.
Right.
There's enough books in the world.
It's old enough.
I just, I don't disagree with I agree... No, I disagree with the sense that the Judeo-Christian pairing being so easy... But I think the problem, like the problem with me is that to me it's Abrahamic. Islam should be included in the conversation. Right. Like it's just is. They're Abrahamic. It's all based on Judaism, and it's just a little bit of who the different Messiah is.
Right, but the Americans support Israel. And you look cross-eyed if you don't support the state of Israel.
I'm so confused on that. I don't understand it.
I don't think most Americans do either.
I don't understand. Like
it's
militarily, I
long
get it.
and complicated.
Israel is a bunch of. Yeah, like the military, like I understand like the kind of military alliance that it's a partner in a region of a bunch of people that hate us. So having a strong military partner in a region full of people that don't like us as a strategic advantage, I get that part of it. But part of the reason they hate us is because we support them. And it's like, well, could we get along with this other set of multiple countries better if we dropped this teammate we have? Because
Isn't one of their major issues with the Saudis?
Israel?
Yeah.
I know Iran's
Or is it just
like
Iran?
Iran's the big one to me. Who's like Iran's like if Iran said it out loud, if you didn't have the backing and support of the United States, we would erase you from existence.
Huh.
All right, time out. So anyway, potty break. Sorry, I'm losing my. I'm getting old. I can't hold my pee for the whole 2 hours anymore. Which I don't know. I'm thinking about maybe we should shorten the show. I'm just holding on. I don't know why I got stuck on that 2 hour number. Maybe an hour and some change. Plan an hour and see what happens. If it goes long, it goes long. Maybe that's a better way to do it moving forward.
There's definitely been times where just kind of meandered.
Yeah,
But I mean that's 45 minutes. Sometimes it ends up being good conversation.
Right,
Other times it's all over the place.
Because like last week, we went 20 minutes on your news of the weird with the steroid Olympics.
Yeah.
Because I thought it was an interesting little path to go down. I mean, we could touch on what we touched on last week too. Is like, I think this whole gendered sports thing is a big deal, and I think it's something that needs to be talked about. And I think people are scared to talk about it because, I'm sure some of the stuff I've said on here have been labeled as a homophobe or xenophobic or transphobe or whatever the fuck it is. And it's like, no, I think there is some part of this that is, if we're going to have a system in place, especially if it's funded by tax dollars, and it's supposed to be a battlefield of equals, you're not going to get equals when you're having trans women compete with regular women. just not going to happen. There will be some examples.
It's definitely a complicated topic. Everyone wants to just kind of like simplify it, and it's just if you're a man or a woman, and that's just. How you have to decide.
I think I'm not.
But for some people, it's not as simple as just that.
Not for, but it is. But I think that's part of the problem. Is that I think people are saying it's more complicated than it actually is. I think it is. I think yes, there are absolutely numbers of cases that make sense where it's a little bit less clearly different. Where we're like, we had this, like it seems that we only have like one or two top stories in different sports. Like we had the swimmer person who was competing with the women that was shattering all the world records for the women's side of swimming. We had the bicyclist that we were talking about here because they were part of the USA cycling circuit that was supposed to be here, and that person didn't end up competing that weekend, but that was what the protest was about and that kind of stuff. You have a couple of the ones that have been in the MMA over the last couple, like 5-6 years. There's been a couple of MMA fighters that are trans women. That are just beating the shit out of girls, and it's really hard to watch. To the point where it's like, yes, that may be the purest example. Is that it's like this is like MMA is a weight class sport, but it's a weight class and gendered sport.
Right.
Boxing's the same way. You could have a 165-pound man and a 165-pound woman square off, and by weight they're in the same class, but they're not going to function the same. They're not going to fight the same. They're not. It's just not. It's not. It would not be. I wouldn't want to watch a flyweight fight of a man and a woman, even though they're in the same weight class. I would go so far to say is that realistically, you could probably have a woman who is in the heavier weight classes fight a guy that's a flyweight, and the flyweight guy is still going to beat her. Realistically, and so I think they're like. Because to me, there's two parts to play. When there's tax funding to play, I get it, but the other part of it is the economics of sport. To me, sport is just it's an economics machine. They're multi-billion-dollar businesses.
The Olympics found a way to allow it. The MMA obviously found a way that they thought was fair enough to allow a fight to happen and for betting to go on.
I mean, they've since changed it. They've taken it back because they were wrong. They're like, nope, we were wrong about that. That was not remotely fair fight. These were not two people that had the ability. There was no way that fighter A was beating fighter B and fighter B being a trans woman. We thought the person in transition of many years ago, and the testosterone and estrogen levels were in a logical place for a female fighter to be, but this trans woman just was beating the shit out of girls. Okay, well, let's put it this way then.
Because if you look at, even just, essentially you're looking at genetics. You have, traditionally, the Ethiopians that are just phenomenal distance runners. They literally have a genetic advantage over most of the general population. Tibetan Sherpas can climb up to the top of Mount Everest
without a mask,
with no oxygen.
Right.
They are genetically just that much more advantageous.
Sure. And I think it makes the sport a little bit harder to
so I mean there are instances to where there are just types of people with certain genetics that are just phenomenal at almost anything that they want to do.
Okay, but
they just have phenomenal strength.
I would still argue that the fastest Ethiopian marathon runner female isn't gonna win men's races, even with that genetic advantage of that part. I don't know that. I haven't seen it tested, but that would be my assumption based on the other evidence I've seen in other places. There are people. You're right. Muggsy Bogues was a phenomenon in being the shortest NBA player ever. All the different
NHL
sports.
to NFL.
I didn't do Major League Baseball because it starts with an M. I'm at least smart enough not to do the wrong first letter. But he was phenomenal in how despite his shortness.
Right.
Because it was possible, and I hate the game of basketball. I think the game of basketball sucks. But he was so good and so fast and so this and so that and the other that he made up for his lack of genetics in being so short that he could still get out there and play. And it was, and that was a great story. Just in the story thing that all sports kind of insert these great stories and feel good and bullshittery. Like the Muggsy Bogues story is a great story.
Right. Because
of the overcoming said genetic defect or not defect, but genetic.
I can still shoot.
Genetic shortcoming, no pun intended.
Right.
And so, I don't disagree with you that there are other things even inside the gendered sets. But I mean, again, like I think the conversation is the conversation to me is like we have the tax funded sports and the private sports. I think that's the first part to break down in the conversation. If we're going to talk tax funded, especially when you get into like high school and collegiate athletics, what's the point? If the point of college of high school sports, I think that's a good place to start because I think that's the more like deep down like primal thing that people get all bent out of shape about. When it comes to high school sports, I don't care. I really don't care. I don't think it's a big deal. One, none of them are really that good at the sport yet anyway, except for basketball because basketball is a shitty sport. But like most of those sports, like you're not going to have a high schooler in most sports that are going to compete with a professional, regardless of gender and size and all that kind of stuff. Actually, that's not true.
Hockey and soccer's not far off.
They get there, right? You get some late high school age kids that are pro level. You're right. But I'm just saying, like, for the most part, that's kind of anomalous. You don't have a lot of that. And you used to have that in basketball, but they've made some rules and changed some of that shit around and whatever, blah, blah, blah. But my point is, if the point of again, like, what's the point of high school sports? Is the point of high school sports to build, teamwork skills and leadership skills and just general fitness and healthy lifestyle and trying to take care of your body, not doing the stupid things like going out and partying and drinking too much in high school, even though the football players are the ones that always do it the most, at least in the movies. But like, is if those are the things that we're trying to get out of it, then who cares? Realistically, to me, I don't care. If that's the point, then cool. I think anybody who wants to play and has the skill set to compete on a level should be able to play. Now, I do think it does come into question, like, why do we have girls and boys soccer if it doesn't matter, but whatever. But if the point is where to make that individual feels comfortable in the group that they're with and they feel like this is my group of people because I'm a girl or I'm a boy or whatever it is, then who cares? Because if what we're after is building, teamwork skills, leadership skills, fitness, all those different like actual life skills that go along with sports, because I think that is a big thing in sports for a lot of kids. I think that anybody and everybody who wants to play and can compete at a level with their colleagues should be able to go out and participate. But then you get into college level where it gets a little bit more dicey, because to me, college football, college basketball, college hockey in anywhere but the South, this starts getting, to me, it gets into semi-pro level stuff, and then we have to start having the conversation about where pro sports, private entity sports sit in the conversation. Because to me, in the private sports entity conversation, I don't care. It's up to that sport. Like, we had girl goalies a couple times in hockey. I didn't care. Yeah. Like, I was actually annoyed by it, not because it was a girl, because they wouldn't stop fucking talking about it. She was a good goalie. She played the game well. Let's play. I don't want to hear the story about this girl playing the game and whatever. I just want to watch hockey. She plays hockey well, even with the men. Let's go. Right. Don't care. Like, and so, like, to me, like, and again, it's the apathy of my general personality. Now, to me, like, if we're pursuing an end that makes sense, I don't care. But I think when it gets into the non-professional sports, into the Olympic style sports, is when that's when it gets complicated. That's when I don't know how to answer those questions. Yeah. Because to me, again, like, I make the joke, like, why do we bother having gendered sports then? Let's just throw it away. Let's just not bother. Because if the like again and like what again like maybe that's the better way to address this, and maybe not put my own injections into the whole thing. Like, what is the point? Like, what is the greater good point of having U.S. women's gymnastics team? Like, what is the value in that? On a societal level, what does that do for us as U.S. citizens? Like, I do enjoy watching the Olympics. I enjoy watching gymnastics in the Olympics, and not in a pervy old man way. Like, I actually appreciate the skill set that these girls put out there.
Yeah. Like, how are you not dizzy?
Right.
You just did like 15 backflips,
like
back to back.
That one chick that broke her ankle on the vault thing and that whole mess, and the coach picked her up and carried her off, and she got her gold medal. It was like that was like a sob story. Great, like, it was a perfect moment in sports. It was amazing. I like sports, and that was an amazing moment in sports, even though it's a sport that I don't have a particular care for.
Stuck those arms up, stuck the landing,
and then she started hopping around because she broke the fuck out of her ankle.
Yeah.
And that's cool, and that's cool for me, and I enjoyed the moment. And there's thousands or millions of Americans who enjoyed that moment. But like, what's the point? And I say that kind of jokingly and throwing away, but the realistic question too is like, what's the point? Like, what do Olympics do? For Putin, at least, Olympics gave him an excuse to go steal Crimea. At least that's some conversation that I've heard out in the grand scheme of things. After Sochi is when he went and took Crimea because the Russians were really happy with their medal count, and so they were drunk on Olympic medals, not paying attention to when he went and
after they got
took
busted left and right for doping.
Well, they didn't really get that whole mess. Yeah, that's a whole. Have you seen Icarus?
Yeah,
that's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Anyway, that guy's doing another one that's supposed to be pretty good too. I need to find it, and I need to watch it. I haven't seen it yet. But again, so let me calm myself for a second. Let you speak instead of keep talking. But like realistically, like what do you feel like the point of like an Olympic? Like, I mean, this is tax dollars at play. This is our money that's being spent on, Simone Biles, which is a bad example because she actually has independent money because she's famous enough for the sport. But she does, the women's gymnastics doesn't exist without tax dollars. The U.S. women's water polo team, it's a real thing. It exists.
Funded by
the U.S. It's U.S. tax dollars.
I mean, how so?
I mean,
what budget is that coming out of?
It's a good question.
Just like a grant from just like the State Department
That is a great question. I don't know
diplomacy?
the answer to that. I don't know. That's a great question. But I know they get funding. They get tax dollar funding.
Like they're fully funded by, or they get funding from.
They get funding from. I don't think they're. And again, I mean, there's a lot of questions. That what does fully funded mean?
Right.
Like the most, like the U.S. men's curling team.
Well, I mean, fully funding would be the U.S. taxpayers have paid for all these Olympic facilities to be built, training facilities to be built.
I would think yes.
Fully funded by.
I would think that any U.S. training facility, any U.S. Olympic training facility, regardless of sport, is owned and was bought and owned by the U.S. government. I would assume. I don't know that for 100% fact, but I'm guessing it, or it's a public university. A lot of like a couple of, I can't remember what it was. Like I think like
the same because a training facility like that. I mean, yes,
like in Milwaukee. Okay, so like I actually know, for example, in Milwaukee is the U.S. speed skating training facility in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's a big, huge Olympic ring. It's got 2 hockey rinks on the inside. I got to play there once as a kid. It was kind of cool.
So I was about to say, but it's not a single-use facility,
right? But it was built and paid for by both the city of Milwaukee, the state of Wisconsin, and the federal government as a U.S. training facility for speed skating. And then as a way to defer costs, it's open to the public for public skates. Like Pee Wee hockey that I played can rent ice time and play games there. Tournaments are held there, stuff like that. And so they have a way to defer the costs of it, of the facility itself. Now, what the trainers and what the people who are skaters and stuff get paid, that's a whole separate thing. But that was both state, federal, and local tax dollars built that facility with the main goal of training athletes, but then with the offset of we get to pay some of this off with other things that we can do here. Yeah, cool place to skate. Like that's a long those Olympic ice skating or Olympic speed skating. It's a big rink.
Well, the Olympic hockey rinks
are a little bigger than
like
pro
10,
rinks.
20 feet wider.
No, they're not that much wider. Maybe 10. They're like 4 or 5 aside. Yeah, I don't know. You're right. They're bigger. They're definitely bigger. And actually, I think they were standard hockey rinks inside because you can't put an Olympic hockey rink inside because the oval's not that wide. I think. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Point is, tax dollars get funded it. Going back to the origins of the story, what's
the point of it?
Like, what's the value in it? Like, as a U.S. citizen, as somebody who is contributing small portions of your own to this, but it's some of
you make that argument about lots of things.
I agree, but I'm just saying, like, I mean, it's
promoting. I mean, one thing, it's just something that's gone on. I mean, it got restarted. Was it late 1800s, early 1900s? When they started kind of redoing the Olympics. It was a way, to kind of like showcase your top people in certain sports to the world. So you can kind of go on. It's a little bit more of a camaraderie. I don't know. I mean, people definitely take honor in winning their medals or just participating in the Olympics or being an Olympian. I mean, some of these people, sports are their life. It's really all they want to do.
Sure, and that's nice. And
Right.
there's things that I would like to do that it would be great if I could live in a world where that's all I want to do, but brings no real value back to the world. That's the question.
I mean, I could say that about lots of professional sports.
Sure, you can say it about all professional
What
sports.
value is that? Well, people
But the
wanna
difference,
watch it.
well, the difference in professional sports is people pay to watch it. And I mean, honestly, Olympic sports people do
pay
too.
to go
But
watch.
but that money doesn't go back. Most of that money doesn't go back to you. When you get into Olympics and stuff like that, most of that money doesn't go back to that's all.
Doesn't go back to whom?
It doesn't go back to the countries very little of it goes back to the countries that are participating in it, and more specifically, none of it,
Sure.
by definition, goes back to the athletes that are participating in it.
I'd say it's probably where they have endorsement rights as far as Reebok, Nike, whatever.
Right. And yeah, but basketball goes back and forth on whether they let the pros play or not. Well, if you're an amateur basketball player who is not professional, you might get lucky and get noticed by a pro team and picked up because you did so well in an Olympic run.
Right.
But again, my point is, a professional sport, we pay for it, and the money that we pay as consumers of it is what pays these people, for the most part. Now we have the stadium issues like we have here in Knoxville, where the city governments and county governments and state governments are pitching in to build stadiums for these owners and shit, which I think we agree is kind of bullshit. And it's not necessarily an economic advantage and this, that, and the other, all the kind of fucking bullshit on that part of it. But in and of itself, the Randy Boyd and the Smokies exist because people pay for tickets, people pay for drinks, people pay for these things. That pays the salaries of players, as well as the Cubs pitch in from the top level stuff and all that kind of bullshit that baseball depths go on. But they don't exist without the fans coming out and paying for it. Whether it's directly through the Smokies or the Cubs affiliate, or like the Cubs parent company sends money down to help cover the bills because of the way the structure's set up.
Right, and there's fans that show up for Olympic trials. I mean, not as much, but there's people that still.
But again,
pay
that's
to
not
see these things.
But that's not paying. That's not paying the athletes.
I'm assuming they're getting funded somehow. I mean, it can't all just be endorsement rights, but I don't know.
Yeah, tax
Don't know how
dollars
the
are funding
funding
them,
works.
among other things. I mean, I do think there's endorsement deals. I do think there's like the people that make water polo balls will give a bunch of balls to the U.S. Olympic team so that kids that are playing water polo want to use that brand ball. They want to use a Spalding ball, not a Wilson ball, because the Olympians use the whatever.
Right.
I mean, yeah, sure, that exists. And that might get them some of their equipment and stuff, but, all those people are working day jobs because they don't get paid for the athlete part. My point is, in professional sports, the athletes get paid, but the way the athlete gets paid is because of those tickets and stuff like that. The Olympic
Right, and some
athletes
of those
don't
Olympic
get paid
sports,
for those.
they have Olympic teams. It's not that many. I mean, the Women's World Cup is coming up. We have a Women's National Soccer League.
Right, and they do get paid. And there's a whole, they get paid the same as the men's team does now, apparently.
But I mean, there's some sports that do have professional outlets to where they're Olympians and professional athletes.
Right. And again, because I would say the majority of both the U.S. and men's and women's teams are made up of players who play professionally in the private leagues.
Right.
It's not like when we went and lost to Trinidad and Tobago 6 years ago or whatever it was and missed the World Cup, where their all-star player was a pineapple rancher or something like that. I mean,
we still have those countries that happens to.
Yeah, we got Pulisic or whatever who's playing. Where is he now? He's in Germany now, or is he in Italy?
I think he's in great.
I thought he left. He was in.
I
He was playing.
Chelsea. I think he was in the Premier League, but
I think he just got. I think he just got sold or whatever they call it. He went.
I think he might be with Barcelona now.
Maybe.
I did see an article. Apparently, and I guess it's already come to fruition. But there's a new
AC Milan.
Italian. But now try to bring a cricket league back to America. I guess we used to have one.
Let's do it. Why not? I mean, but again, these things exist. It's the same argument with. Okay, so I guess to clarify my argument in this whole pay who pays whatever kind of thing is we go back to college football being an easy example, college sports at large, but college football being the easy example.
Are they getting paid?
They are now, but not really. The more I think about it, the more this name and likeness thing's bullshit too. Because University of Tennessee sells 100,000 something seats, a multi-million-dollar contract with SEC, ESPN, SEC Network, that kind of shit. Armark charges $20 a fucking beer and all the kind of shit. The millions and millions of dollars that go into one weekend at a UT football game, and those players get tuition from UT. If they're getting paid as players for UT, it's because they're going out and doing name and likeness rights. It has nothing to do. I mean, it only exists because they're players, but it has nothing. Like, the university is not managing it. They're not paying them salaries. It's this Milton character, who's our new quarterback, is really good, and so Jim Cockle Dodge is going to pay him $10,000 to do a commercial with him. And I don't know. UT might get a cut of that. I don't know.
And it's that weird thing.
They don't get paid.
They're not getting paid money, but at the same time, they're saving a hell of a lot of money and not paying tuition. Probably not having to pay for any fucking meals.
No. It's full on. They get everything paid for. Everything. Their wardrobes and all that other kind of shit goes into it. All their clothes and all that. For the most part, everything's pretty much paid for by the university. But I mean, still, what's a semester at UT?
No idea.
But if you play the comparisons game of the value that this Milton character is bringing to UT in cash dollars, not in education or.
Can you equate to that? What that one individual is bringing in monetary value?
I mean, I think in some ways you can. I mean, like the one main part of the name and one main part in the name and likeness is that they get a cut of their jersey sales,
right?
And I would say you could track that part at least. But look, I mean, at the end of the day, talking heads do what they do in sports broadcasting and shit like that. Fine, maybe not Mr. Milton himself, but. The UT wins football games. It makes a lot of people a lot of money, especially in Knoxville. Milton can win or lose games. He's not making any more money, except for in an outside third-party transaction and jersey sales. So the only thing that's inside UT would be his jersey sales, but everything else he's going to make as a student athlete is going to be going and doing a commercial for Pals. That's actually a basketball player, which is a fun story. I like that one.
Right.
But you know what I'm saying, and so going back to probably, and it's that is probably a more similar equatable situation to most Olympic athletes, is they're only going to really paid like any real significant amount of money when they happen to be so good at it, like a Michael Phelps. Like Michael Phelps made a ton of money from Subway and the XYZ of different promotions that he did in that part of the game, and he was only famous because of swimming and blah 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 blah. But it was an outside thing. It wasn't for the process. Millions of people watched him swim. He didn't make $1 off of the million people watching him swim. He made $1 off of parlaying that millions of people who liked him as a swimmer into a commercial for Subway. And that's what a Milton's going to do at UT. Which, again, my point is, when the Smokies sign a player and say, we guarantee you we're going to pay you this much, they have to pay him that much. And the way they make the money to pay him that much is with ticket sales, with advertising revenue, with all the stuff that they do. But the team is the one that is paying them.
Okay.
Directly, not third-party avenues.
Okay. We have established that the Olympics is a totally different monetary setup for the players versus professional sports. Okay.
And so, but that's when I roll back into, because part of the monetary setup for the Olympic sports and for college sports and for high school sports specifically is where the trans issue comes into play, in that we do have a say, because some of that's our money, and we get to elect the people who get to handle our money for us. And so I think it's, I think it's a conversation that needs to be had, in a realistic conversation, because it's if the point is for competition and competition only, then either get rid of gendered sports or don't let trans women play. Because that's the only one you're going to have what quote-unquote fairish competition. If the point is for all those other things that I was talking about, then what's the point? Who cares? Because realistically, how many of them are going to go pro? But then the other side of it too is, and I get this like, it's I do think I think going back to the first thing that you said about it is the oversimplification of it. Is that I think the number one oversimplification is that there's people out there that say, well, he's only saying he's a girl so that he can win. Now, I don't think that's true. I think that's an oversimplification. I think for most of the athletes that's a
general assumption that they're just trying to game the system. It's like, there was the...
I don't doubt there was I don't doubt that there is one or two that are out there that are doing it because that's the only way.
Well, he didn't win at the collegiate level, so then he became a she, and then now they're kicking ass and winning awards.
Right.
Like they're only doing it so they could win.
Right. And that's an intent game, and we can't know the intent.
Right.
Like we can't unless we find some audio where he's hanging out with his buddies going like, "Oh, I fooled those fuckers. I told them I was a girl, and I'm the national championship of this."
Right. And
that ain't gonna happen. And so, like, that part I agree with you on. That's oversimplified. I think it's a complicated situation for those individuals, and I think it's a very hard situation for them to be in, and I don't envy it at all.
Right.
And I don't wish to be a parent who has to try to figure out how to navigate that with one of my kids. Not that I'm going to hate them or love them any less if they are. I'm just saying that it is hard enough to raise a quote unquote normal boy. To add that layer into it, especially if they were athletes, which they're not, thankfully, it would be very difficult. It'd just be very difficult, and I don't wish that. I don't wish the difficulty of that, having to deal with that on anybody. But I don't know how else to, like. There's no reasonable solution that I can think of, other than just sticking to birth certificates. That's the only reasonable solution I can think of.
Yeah,
I don't know. Like again, I'm not going to die on this hill again, because I think if we're focusing on what the point is, on what we're trying to get for the individual students and athletes, I think if the focus is teamwork and camaraderie, get out there and get it. Get work as a team, leadership skills. Those things are great things, and I don't care how you figure out how to get kids to get those things worked out. Those are good things to have. And so
I agree.
It's the economics of youth sports that I think is the problem, I suppose, and why this is a real issue. If there wasn't economics involved, if there weren't universities making millions of dollars and stuff like that off of these student athletes, I don't think this conversation would be even worth having. But there's money in the game. Which brings in
that's part of it, but I'd say it's probably close to 50-50 now that sports betting is now legalized. Then it throws that much more of a wrench to some people.
I mean that's on the gambler anyway. That's on the gambler in the book. I mean the book has to figure out a number that makes sense for the matchup that's in front of them. It doesn't. Who cares? Like a good bookie, or I'm sorry, a good bookmaker. That's the technical job. Bookie's the dirty one. A good bookmaker's job is to set up a bet, to set up an odds that gets people taking both sides.
Right.
That's all they want. And so like for a good bookmaker, it doesn't matter who you put against each other. You could put Serena Williams.
No, what I'm saying, but people literally have more skin on the line and kind of their thoughts on the way sports should or should not go.
I don't follow. Yes, more people have a different type of investment in their sports watching. Is that what you're saying? I agree with that. Because when you're gambling, it changes what you care about in the game. It's not really about like I want to see a great game, or I want to see my bet win.
I guess some of the same people that think with it being unfair, or they're only doing it just to make the game unfair or to try to cheat the system.
But I'm gonna say, but I guess the reason I'm pushing back on the casino, the gambling part of it is if Conor McGregor and Ronda Rousey were going to fight, a good bookmaker will put a number on that has people betting both sides.
Right.
It's going to be a Conor McGregor minus 1,000 or something like that. It's going to be significantly in his favor. You're going to have to put a lot of money up on McGregor to win $10, where you could put $1 on Ronda Rousey and win 1,000. But that's bookmaking, and so the gambler's part doesn't.
Right, but in years past, it was essentially just Vegas was one of the few places you could actually go and do betting. Now, I'd say a majority of states have some kind of legalized sports betting.
No, I agree with you. I'm just saying that the bookmaker, if the bookmaker does their job well, which they're pretty fucking good at, it doesn't matter who the setup is, and it doesn't matter about it. Fairness doesn't even really matter.
Most people that are betting are not thinking about the fucking bookmaker side of it. They're looking at how much they can win or how much they could lose on it.
But they're going to make
But they
that.
see they see sports as far as if the rules are changing and the sports that they love so dearly and are putting
how
money
I make
down
my
on.
decisions are different now because or how I used to make
Well, no,
my
they
decisions
just
have
think-
changed.
They just think the sport's being perverted by this or that. Grab me one. I don't know. I just think more people are getting involved in, or would be more. I guess. How do I put it?
Go ahead.
More people, I guess, have more invested into it monetarily and just kind of thought wise.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm not.
it's just a thought.
I get what
Saying with the increased availability and usage, because I can't remember one of the last numbers that I heard, but it was fucking crazy, like something like $2 billion or something that was spent on just like sports betting in a calendar year or whatever.
Oh, I'd say it's way more than
Talk
that.
Right. I don't remember exactly, but I'd say it, something astronomical. But I was like, wait, how much? What?
Yeah, it's probably in the hundreds
That's
of
one of
billions.
those crazy numbers that we wonder, like, what the fuck's going on in the economy when you essentially have most of that, which I don't know. I'm assuming some of the more reputable, like sports betting sites, probably do have some kind of form you're supposed to print out in the tax season if you.
Oh, I mean, at least I know Vegas is obligated if you make over X,
Right.
to get basically a W-9,
Right.
or an I-9, W-4, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, even in that, just the general of even before it was legalized sports betting, you still had underground sports betting that was left and right, although just like anything on the black market that you literally had billions, if not
Sure.
close to $1 trillion.
I'd say you have more
Floating
you still
around
have
this-
billions and trillions of dollars floating around the black market game as well as the legal game
Right, yeah.
simultaneously.
Right.
Because
Think
I
about
don't
like, where's all the money at? It's like, well, it's where you can't see it.
right. I mean, that's one of those things to me in like life in general. Like I just look around and like, what do these people do? Like I
Right.
see all these people with, like I mean, at this point, a decent house in Knoxville is $500,000. And a Lexus and a Rolls, and they're not a Rolls, but
I mean, to a certain extent, there is that kind of proverbial like glass ceiling that, once you're able to accumulate enough wealth, you can then start investing. That just pretty much just kind of keeps growing upon itself for the most part.
yeah.
But I mean, if you're below a certain level, you're never getting to that point.
Yeah, it's a
They talk about generational wealth,
it is one of those
of
things.
wealth that can be
Yeah.
passed around to generations.
I mean, I'm absolutely a profiteer of generational wealth. I mean, I got my grandmother just started throwing money in a savings account when I was born that I didn't even know about. Started house shopping. Mom was like, "Are you going to use grandma's money?" It's like, "What?" And so it took the down payment. And like most people, a lot of people don't have that option. That grandma had a savings account that I didn't even know existed.
Grandma's did that, but I knew I had it. That we were all given to once we graduated. I think mine was maybe like $5 or $6 grand. Probably close to half of it I spent just going to Germany right after graduating.
Whatever. It's worth spending. I mean,
Yeah.
you spend it on something.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's just like I think mine was like 15 grand once it came out. Like taxes were weird that year, but yeah, there's. I mean, but that's on a philosophical level though, like she did that for me. She was able to do that. She did that for me. Why should the government take a big chunk of that? The more salient example to me is like, I got the advantage of having that money available to me to help me buy this house, and I'm buying this house. And by the time my kids graduate from high school and stuff like that, and they're out in their real world, we'll pretty close-ish to having this house paid off, or we'll be past the halfway point at least. And so I can pull equity out of this house to help them buy their house and stuff like that. Why shouldn't I do that? Why wouldn't I do that? And why should I or they be punished in that process for doing that?
It's a punishment.
Sure. If I take 30 grand out of my house to give one of my children or both my children 15, but they only get 10 to spend on what they're once the taxes and all that roll out, they only have 10 to spend on whatever it is.
So why pay taxes for gambling?
That's a punishment. What do you mean?
That's
why
a
pay
punishment too. You won.
I was
10
sorry.
grand on slots. Should you not have to pay taxes on that as well?
Okay, but that's 10 grand that nobody paid taxes on. That's a new 10 grand in existence. Not really, but that's a new 10 grand in existence. That is income to you.
Yeah.
I already paid my income taxes when I made the money to buy this house. Why is that income getting taxed again when I spend it? Because that's essentially what's happening. It's not directly that. When I gift that $15,000 to my kid, my income that made that $15,000 exist is now getting taxed again because they're calling it his income now.
All right, but it's taxed at a very low rate as far as like gift tax. But
I mean, if it's technically a gift, you get like one a decade or something like that, and there's a different tax subset in there. Yes, but like I mean, you talk about some of these inheritance taxes and stuff that have been floated in conversations, like 50% sometimes. Some of the capital gains.
I think most of those are above like $200,000, $500,000 type things.
But again,
it's just trying to prevent that ginormous,
on the
transfer of wealth.
But on the principle of the idea,
without taxes.
I mean, and I guess we can argue on whether the parent made that money without being a complete douchebag, which is probably not true. They probably were an asshole and dodged taxes and stuff their entire life to have that kind of wealth sitting around. But if they went out there and earned that money and paid taxes on that money and saved that money and invested that money and did the things with that money to make that money exist to be available to their kids, it's the same principle. Okay, just because it's a bigger number, I don't know. I mean, why? That just seems weird to me.
What's weird about it?
I mean, if you're going to tax a Bill Gates for giving his, does he even have kids? Whatever. Bill Gates' kids are going to inherit $100 million. And since it's over a certain amount, the government's allowed to tax a bunch of it in that inheritance tax thing. Then just because I only have $100,000 to give my kids, you don't tax me? I mean, in a fairness conversation, that's not fair. If you're taxing him, you should tax me.
It depends on how the tax is set up. There's certain levels.
I would say, like the idea of
should everyone be taxed the same rate across the board, no matter if you make $10,000 a year or $10 million a year?
I mean,
should they be taxed at the same rate?
That seems fair.
Okay.
I mean, that's not fair to you?
No.
I mean, I would think the idea of if you make $1, we take 10 cents. You make $100, we take 10 cents 100 times. Seems like the fair way to do something.
All things being equal, yes. But in the fact of life, no, I wouldn't consider that fair.
Okay.
I mean, realistically, someone making, we'll say, $10,000 a year. Obviously, it's not a livable wage, but $10,000 a year. You take 10%, you take out $1,000. They're now living on $9,000 a year. They were already well below the poverty line. You've now just taken out 10% of it. Someone making $10 million a year, you take out $1 million. They're no worse for wear.
I mean, that's a value judgment, but okay.
That's a value judgment?
Sure.
How so?
I mean, it's a value judgment in the sense that it may have an effect on them. They may have expenses that exceed that number now that they don't have as much. Now, is it right or proper or needed to exceed that much? Probably not. But they may have an expensive lifestyle, obviously, because they have a bunch of fucking money. The same way, like, I don't know.
Now, so the poor person has to tighten their belt buckle, but the rich person, like, how dare they have to tighten their belt buckle? Everyone's got expenses, but I guarantee you that person at the higher end is not worrying about expenses.
I mean, okay, sure.
If they're not, they don't have that kind of value that they would be taxed at that high rate. If they literally just have monetary value, just kind of in flux.
Right. I get what you're saying. I don't know. I just okay. I disagree on that one, and that's okay. Yeah. I don't know how to articulate. You got a news? You said you're not sure. You had some corrections in the record?
Yeah, there was a couple fact check things. Yeah, this one was funny enough. I think you even got a chuckle when I said it. No, Amish kids aren't immune to cancer, diabetes, and autism. and they aren't vaccine free either.
The vaccine one's the only one that I could, like, kind of gives me, like, I don't understand the rules of Amishness, I guess is the moral of the story here.
There's varying levels of it. Just with any, there's varying sects of Christianity that have a wide variety of values on different things.
Because you're right, because we have, like, the Jesus Christ Scientist ones that they're vaccine free. And
right. You put science in your name. Yeah, we don't believe in it.
Jesus Christ, anti-science.
We appropriated science.
But, yeah, that's the only one, like, the other ones make total sense to me. The vaccine one's the only one that kind of gave me a pause, because it's just like, I don't know. I don't know the rules. Like, I don't, like, other than the Rumspringa or whatever it's called.
Rumspringa?
Yeah. Like, I understand the premise of that one, but, like they don't have pianos? Like, they don't do pianos?
Why wouldn't they do pianos?
I don't know.
There's nothing electrical in them whatsoever. It's hammers hitting strings.
I don't know. I guess because they can't make them.
The hell they can't make them. They're badass woodworkers.
Yeah, but anyway, I don't know. Like, I feel like there's the lack of music in the Amish community would bother me.
It's possible. Well, I told you about hearing an Amish. I think it was a teenager riding down the road in a buggy with a boombox.
Yeah, I mean, you see the
battery
videos,
powered, but
you see the videos all the time of the buggy at the 7-Eleven picking up Bud Light or whatever. I've seen those videos a couple times. All right, if you're Amish out there and you're listening, hit me up. We'll do a show. I'd love to have you on the show. So, anything else? Last call?
Nah, that's it.
All right. Sam, do the outro.
No, thank you.
God damn it. One day, I'm going to catch you off guard and you're just going to start rolling.
I've done it like twice, and that was about it.
And you were great at it. Not
really.
I mean, you're not any worse than I am.
No, drunk and slurred through it.
What do you think I'm doing? Almost an agreement at gmail.com. I don't know why my drunk voice is a Southern gentleman, I suppose. Almost agreement at gmail.com. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on YouTube. The Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, favorite podcast provider, hit us up there. Website's almostagreement.com. Election guide voter thing 23 will be coming soon. Keep in touch. Scott from Encompass and I are going to try to do some post-primary candidate head-to-head debate matchups and get to talking to them. Check out eVape Tavern, 1207 North Central Street. It's the new pirate bar. It's the coolest thing in town. You should totally hit them up and see what's going on in there. I'll be there tomorrow night, and then I got to turn around and open Sunday morning. So I got a 3 a.m. close and a 10 a.m. open. So it's going to be a long, hard weekend for me. Almost here, everybody. Thanks for listening. See you later.